Welcome back to my YouTube page. We're here today to do the brakes on a 2008 F-150. In this video, I'll be doing the front brakes on the ground with jack and jack stands and mostly hand tools. If you want to see me doing the similar brake system with the air tools and on the lift, look up my video on the 2011 Ford Crown Victoria where I do the rear on the lift. This will be the front on the ground. Once the vehicle is jacked up on level ground, put a wheel chock behind the rear wheel so that it doesn't roll away. Jack stands underneath the frame. Find this relief on the hubcap, reach in behind here, pry the hubcap off carefully. It is plastic, so and it looks like this from behind. Be careful, plastic. If you do not have air tools, then you'll have to use a four-way. When using a four-way, the wheel is going to try to turn. So you'll have to wedge wood or something underneath the tire or loosen your lug nuts before you jack up the vehicle. By loosen, I mean just get them a little loose. Don't try to take in your lug nuts off when it's on the ground. Now that the wheel is off and you can actually get to the brakes, you'll want to take the bolts loose, both holding the caliper to the slide and the bolts holding caliper bracket to the steering knuckle. Now you reach behind here and there's an 18mm bolt, boxed end of the wrench on there, the open and exposed. You want to hook the box end of the next wrench like so. And you get your shoulder behind the wheel well. You have leverage. Hand on the end of the long, you don't want it over here or over here, it'll slip off, that could gouge you. You'll be burnt, bruised, or bleeding. In this case, bleeding. And push, break that bolt loose. You have to do a similar situation on the bottom. Hook, extra leverage, and of course, you're going to pull. Now it's broken loose. You have to do these smaller bolts that hold the slides the same way. I believe they're 13mm. Once you get them out, you're going to want to either take your screwdriver, force the pistons back in the caliper this way, or when you take the caliper off, you can use a special pair of vice grips, force the pistons back down in the caliper. Once you remove your caliper, which is a dual piston caliper by the way, it's very heavy. So you'll either want to take a bungee, strap it here to hang it, or you can put together a concrete block and some wood, something for it to rest on, so the weight is not pulling on your toes. Then you've got to get your bracket out. Notice I have left the old worn out pads on here because there's a lot of anti-rattle clips, and I'll be working on this while I have my rotor turning. If you're not replacing your rotors, you're going to have to turn them. If you go turn the rotors, make sure you check the minimum thickness that is stamped on the rotor, which will be in millimeters. Now, if your dial caliper does not do millimeters and you need to convert, then you multiply the millimeters by 0.03937. That will give you a measurement in inches. Make sure you move all pretty Harleys away from the lathe. There's going to be metal everywhere. And I don't know of any health benefits to breathing steel, so you should probably wear a dust mask or a respirator, as well as eye protection. As far as I know, metal in the eyes doesn't make your eyesight better either. Okay, now that we've cleaned all our attachments, we put our cutting head on here, got it centered over the rotor, we've got an anti-vibration band on here. We're going to turn the rotor on, the lathe on, let it spin up. Okay, we've got a slight vibration, so we're going to quit and see what the problem is. You can't cut with vibration like that. We'll probably end up taking all of our attachments back off and clean them again and reattach them. Alright, you got to turn your blades in to where they barely touch the rotor and then run them towards the center line. you get down towards this center line, and you cut that rust off, you can set on a fast cut. Cutting speed is right here. You set on a fast cut, and you'll hit rotor feed and let it draw it out. Okay, we've made it all the way down to the center. We're going to draw out with a fast cut. So I moved in 1 notch right here, and 1 notch right here. I push the blades in just a tiny bit. Got it on fast cut. Hit rotor feed. If you run into any kind of problem, you can wreck the rotor, wreck the machine. So you have to keep an eye on it. When I'm happy with this, I'll come back and do a slow cut. And while it's doing a slow cut, that'll take so much time, I'll go over and finish working on the brake. Okay, the rotor looks like it's done. It's not, because this was all done on a fast cut. Now we're going to do a slow cut and give you a really fine finish. Bring the rotor speed down, all the way down to about 2, and it's going to take a while, so we're going to turn off the camera, go back over here, and finish doing the brake work while the lathe does its work. We got to make sure that these pistons are pushed all the way back in the caliper. We're going to pull these slides out, put some anti-seize on here where the pads contact the hardware. Clean these slides really well. They're going to be hard to pull out of there. That's why you got to get that old stuff off. Put brand new anti-seize on here. Better to have a little too much than not enough. Put them back in here and make sure that they move freely. That's much better. Get your dust boot back up on there correctly. While that slow cut's going on, you're going to be taking all the stuff apart on the other side, getting it ready. Turn the rotor. Slow cut's done. You got to put your rotor back on here, but you want to make sure that you take the opportunity to make sure everything here is very clean, and that where your sensor sticks out here for the anti-lock brakes and reads off the reluctor wheel, you make sure that that is very clean. If you ever have to change hub bearings in this, your snap ring is back here. You take that out, the hub bearing presses out from this side out the back, and then press the new hub bearing in here, put the snap ring back in place. Ford recommends you put a new nut on here when you replace this, and new cotter key. I use a breaker bar and a cheater bar and end up literally standing on the thing. Get it as tight as I can. Once you're done with the embarrassing and possibly painful balancing act on the cheater bar, you've got to put this castle nut back on. Put your cotter key in here and bend the tabs up out of the way. I like putting it in from the top, that way if for some reason these do break off, gravity keeps holding it in there. Then your bracket goes on, and the 2 18mm bolts go in from the back. Make sure you use them by hand a few turns. And then your 18mm wrench or ratchet and socket. Now your pads go in. You've got one in the back, one in the front, and I'm going to show you from the front where you can see. There's a little bit of a trick to putting these in here. And don't panic when you see this. This is a material to help with break-in, so that you don't have to go through an elaborate break-in procedure to get your stopping power right away. And I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there's a little bit of nastiness here from my gloves. Okay, my nice Nikon battery died, so I've switched to my old camera here. I hope you can see this clearly. What I was trying to point out is that you're going to get a little bit on your rotor. Here, you're going to have to clean that off when you get done installing the pads. The pads are going to sometimes have a coating on them. Don't be alarmed. That coating is to help with break-in, so you don't have to necessarily have to do an elaborate break-in procedure. One pad's going to go on the back, facing this way. The other pad goes in the front, and there's a little bit of a trick to how you get these down in here in the hardware clips. So you hold the pad at an angle with this edge of the pad facing the rotor. Just touch the hardware here, just touching the hardware down here, and holding it at that angle, you push towards the rotor. Make sure it's in the hardware both ways. I'm moving around trying to give every angle so you can see what's going on here. And then push the back down towards the rotor, flatten it out where it's down. Don't forget,
you have a piece here, depending on which brand of pads that you got. Goes back here.
And when you get to the point where you're putting your pads in, the inner edge of the pad here need to face towards the rotor first, so that you can slip this in at an angle. And then you can flatten it out. It'll go right in. If you try to do it any other way, the hardware will fight you. Same thing with the back, only you're going in at this angle from the back, this angle from the front. Then you've got to put your springs in, and each one of these goes in a hole in the pad itself. And they're going to spread these pads out away from the rotor. You take your caliper, pad, set the caliper over there. Top bolt from the rear, turn it a few turns with your fingers. Bottom bolt. Now the slides have two flats. You don't want the flats front and back like this. You want the flats top and bottom like that. You want to hold them in position with two fingers while turning the bolt with the other. And once you've got a few turns, you can switch to your ratchet, holding the slides again. If you're doing this with the air ratchet, you'll want to hold that slide with a pair of pliers or something so you don't have your fingers in there. The air ratchet spins it fast enough if you cut your fingers to pieces. You know you're close to done because you'll be burnt through your bleeding. All that leaves is putting the wheel back on and pumping up the pedal. Make sure you get the pistons to come out, close the gap. Never get in a vehicle after doing the brakes without pumping up the pedal. Don't even turn it on until you pump the pedal up real good and make sure you've got a good high pedal. Till the next video, get off the couch and get dirty.